the night you said I love you. Remember, you vowed by all the stars above you. Remember.
There is no time warp deeper, gulf more vast, than that between us and the recent past. Today the 50s seems a distant era, though in Tasmania it must seem much nearer. A period of uneventful calm, too close for comfort, void of period charm. The politics of niceness, clean and staid, that was Australia in the 5th decade, before the hairy 60s unleashed sex. The 50s was the age of Laminex, when Melbourne hosted the Olympic Games and couples called their kiddies 50s names. Karen and Bronwyn, Wayne and Craig and Cheryl. This was the world of Sandy Stone and Beryl. The shows were South Pacific, Paint Your Wagon. The claret gurgled from a Winvale flagon. Espresso coffee and the ballpoint pen. The F.J. Holden, Old Spice for men. The rage for square dancing, the death of chintz. The first ducks up the wall. The Van Gogh prints, metal Venetians, ballerina lamps, the birth of TV and those boring stamps, the little Patties and the John O'Keeffes, ashtrays with Aboriginal motifs. Those colours which the 60s were to scorn, lemon and aqua, burgundy and fawn. Then came that moment verging on the holy, when white Australians discovered ravioli, washed down with a little local vino, diluted with a big, brown-flecked, frothy cappuccino. Nice girls with chignons and Braemar twin sets puffed at the new Rothmans king-sized cigarettes. And for sophisticated 50s girls, cocktail Sobranis and Barossa pearls. We had no need for heady cultural frenzies. We had Ken Rosewall and Sir Robert Menzies. Tonight, a 50s paean I intone, the life of Alexander Horace Stone. So join me now to gently excavate his tomb, Glen Iris, 1958.
One day when we were young, that wonderful morning in May, you told me you loved me. When we were young one day, sweet songs of spring were sung, and music was never so gay. You told me you loved me when we were young one day.
I went to the RSL the other night and had a very nice night's entertainment. Beryl, that's the wife, came along too. Beryl's not a drinker, but she had a shandy. She put in quite a reasonable quantity of time yarning with Norm Purvis's good lady. And I had a beer or two with old Norm and some of the other chappies there. I never say no to the occasional odd glass. And Ian Preston, an old friend of mine, he got up and sang a few humorous items. Not too blue on account of the women folk. So that altogether it was a pretty pretty nice type of night's entertainment. We called it a day round about 10-ish. You see, we didn't want to make it too late at night, as Beryl had a big wash on her hands on the Monday morning. And I had to be in town pretty early, stock taking and one thing and another. We would have got back to Kiora, Gallipoli Crescent, approximately in the vicinity of 20 past. And Beryl and I went to bed. I was very glad that we hadn't made it too late tonight on the Sunday, because the Chapmans were expecting us over on the Monday evening for a couple of hours to look at some slides of their trip. He's a very nice type of person. Some of the coloured pictures he'd taken up north were a real picture. Vi Chapman had gone to a dickens of a lot of trouble with the asparagus rolls. So that altogether it was a pretty nice night's entertainment. Educational too. However, round about 10 or 10-ish, I said that we'd have to be toddling. You see, we didn't want to make it too late tonight, as Tuesday was the tennis club picture night, and Beryl had a couple of tickets. Well, there's not much I can say about the Tuesday, except that it was a pretty nice night's entertainment. We're not ones for the theatre as a rule, but when we do go, we like to see a good, bright show. After all, there's enough sadness and unhappiness in the world without going to see it in the theatre. I had a bit of strife parking the vehicle. You know what it's like at that intersection up near the Civic. However, I found a posse in the long run, just when I was beginning to think I might miss the blessed newsreel. The newsreel had a few very informative shots of some of the poorer type of Italian housing condition on the continent. And you know, it made Beryl and I realise just how fortunate we were to have the comfort of our own home and all those little amenities round the home that make life easier for the women folk and the men folk generally in the home. Well, we left soon after interval. Oh, the next show wasn't the best, and I was feeling a little bit on the tired side. Besides, Beryl was expecting her sister and her husband over for a game of 500 on the Wednesday night, so we didn't want to make it too late at night on the Tuesday. Well, we would have got home. Oh, we would have got home, approximately in the vicinity of, give or take a few minutes, 20 past. And Beryl and I went to bed. I had to whiz out of the office on the Wednesday lunch hour to get a few cashew nuts to put round the card table. Beryl was running up a batch of sponge fingers with the passion fruit icing. Oh, there's no doubt about it. Beryl makes a lovely sponge finger. Well, the card night went off very nicely indeed, except that Beryl's sister Lorna got a little bit excited during the 500, and she knocked over a cup of tea and a curried egg sandwich on the new carpet. Oh, she was very apologetic, but as I said to Beryl later, saying sorry won't buy you a new wall-to-wall. And you know what curried egg does to a burgundy axe mincer. By and large, though, all things considered and taking everything into account, it was a pretty nice night's entertainment. They left early-ish, and Beryl and I went to bed. Thursday was pretty quiet in the office, and I was just as glad because I've been feeling a bit more on the tired side than usual. Beryl had another fitting that night. She's getting a new frock made for Jeff and Janice's wedding at Holy Trinity on the 21st. Wants to wear something a little bit special. You know what the women folk are like. Well, I dropped her off at the dressmaker's on my way to lodge. It was a bit on the latest side when I got home, and I went straight to bed and had a very nice night's rest. Always glad when Friday comes. Beryl and I usually have a lovely quiet evening in the home. It's the only chance I get to listen to the wireless. There's usually a good story on the Cool Mint Theatre of the Air on a Friday night, or else an educational quiz. Beryl had been down to the Town Hall Library and got herself the latest Georgette hire. So that between the two of us, we had a pretty nice night's home entertainment. We'd had a run of latish nights, though, and we were both pretty fagged. So, in fact, Beryl was practically a cot case. Round about 10-ish, I filled the hottie, and Beryl and I went to bed. I had to whiz out down to the junction on the Saturday morning to do the weekend shopping. Had a bit of strife parking the vehicle too. You know what it's like down at the junction on a Saturday morning. However, I found a posse in the long run just when I was beginning to think I might miss the blessed butcher. I had a few minutes' worry, though. I lost Beryl in the Foodorama. But she had the good sense to go back to the car. Beryl's got her head screwed on the right way. Well, I got home for a bite of lunch, then I had to race out again to the football. Beryl stayed at home to do the weekend baking. I had the usual strife parking the vehicle too. You know what it's like at Memorial Park on a Saturday afternoon. And then, however, I found a posse in the long run. Just when I was beginning to think I might be late for the bounce, you wouldn't catch me missing an important semi. Beryl had packed me a lovely thermos of Milo, and I was very, very glad of it. It gets very cold and blowy in the outer. Had a bit of strife. Lovely. Had a bit of strife shifting the vehicle. You know what it's like at Memorial Park after a big match. Utility wedged right in front of me. However, I got it out in the long run just when I was beginning to think Beryl might have to wait tea. By the time I got home, it was that blowy. The Herald was all over the front lawn. Next door had invited us in to listen to their microgroove of My Fair Lady. But, well, I'd heard it about 16 or 17 times. In point of fact, it was their microgroove that I had heard that number of times, in view of the fact that their new Stromberg-Carlson radiogram is a little bit on the loudish side. In fact, I never want to hear the blessed thing. So Beryl and I made our excuses and took the opportunity to avail ourselves of a comparatively early shut-eye and went to bed. I'm always glad when Sunday comes. I always clean the car of the Sunday morning and do a bit of pottering in the garden. I'm a bit worried about those roadies. I had the roast midday, as we only like a light tea on a Sunday night. Nice bit of corned beef, nice little dollop of Beryl's chutney on the side of the plate, or else a little drop of Rosella. Nice lettuce, too, with a bit of beetroot staining the lettuce. Some nice scones and nice apricot jam with a nice cup of tea. Saves a big wash-up. I'm really looking forward to the RSL tonight, because if you can go by experience, it ought to be a very nice night's entertainment.
I can't understand. Round my heart, I've got a funny thing. Oh, 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 it's counting on again. Nurse, come over here and hold my hand. I feel awful shy. Nurse, when I look at you, my heart goes doo, doo, doo. Nurse, I'm again thirsty, what you gonna do?
I've just had a little op. The good people here at the Repatriation Hospital have been particularly decent to me for the duration of my stay here, with particular reference to Nurse Younghusband, who's been a real tower of strength. Really bonds the little lads, nothing too much trouble. When I first came into the blamey ward, she put her head round the corner and she said, "My buzzer is there to be used." And you know, for the first few days, I nearly buzzed her silly. Of course, a lot of the different ones expect you to know the ropes straight off. When I first came into the ward, some little madam put her head round the screens first thing in the morning and she said, "Yes or no?" Well, I mean, a man's a strange place with strange women folk flitting about. It's not like your own home by any manner of means. Yes and no, I said. Of course, I've never enjoyed a day's illness in my life, apart from a few little funny turns that Beryl couldn't put her finger on. I toddled off to Dr. Hamilton at the time, and he couldn't put his finger on it either. So this little setback came as quite a surprise to Beryl and my good self. Dr. Hamilton said it wasn't a bit unusual at my time of life, and he said the vast majority of chappies went through it. He said that as far as Beryl and I were concerned, it wouldn't make any difference whatsoever to our married life. He hit the nail on the head there. Of course, Beryl pops in every afternoon about 3:30 to eat the grapes and give me the latest news, which is a lot more than some of the other wives do in the blamey ward. There's a poor old beggar over there with more holes in than a pincushion. His good lady only pops in on Saturday afternoons to listen to the races on his headphones. Well, of course, he's as deaf as a post anyway, so it's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. But Dr. Hamilton said I'll have to take it very, very easy when I'm back on my feet, and I'm giving a lot of serious consideration to the retirement factor. Of course, plenty of chappies retire, they don't know what to do with themselves. Old Jim Fleming from the buying department was a case in point. He was busting to retire, reckoned on putting in a bit more time at his little shack in the hills. Though his wife's almost bedridden, she's still got her own teeth. But we all clubbed together, we bought him a lovely standard lamp and a smoker's companion, and he passed away 2 weeks later. Not my idea of retirement. Then again, I don't want to let my bowls slip. There's a lovely crowd of chappies at the Louisa Hutchinson Memorial Bowling Green, and a man makes a lot of contacts that way. Not that I'll need contacts when I retire, I suppose. More friends, I suppose you'd say. Of course, Beryl and I, we used to be as keen as mustard in the old days of the tennis club before the war. Beryl was a little humdinger in the mixed doubles. She always ran up the best tennis cake, too. We'd sit there in the clubhouse after a match with our thermos and some of the different other couples. and their thermi. Sometimes there'd be dancing or crazy whist. I'll never forget the night Beryl and I won the Lucky Spot dance. It was a pound box of luscious chocolates. Beryl popped them into a new sequined evening bag she'd made herself. She's always been good with fiddly things, but she forgot all about them till after we'd done the Mexican hat dance. She dived for a hanky to blot her lip, and before you could say Jack Robinson, she was up to her wrists in black magic. Oh, that was the dickens of a long time ago, though. You know, and the couples have all moved to different neighbourhoods, and then the war. But somehow it always seems like a long summer afternoon when you're playing mixed doubles. There's a tennis club right next to the repat outside my window, and I can hear them playing right up until when the light goes. And the couple's laughing when there's nothing particularly funny. And the sound of the sprinkler on the spare court. And the sound of the hose being dragged across the tennis court. The couple saying, "Thank you," to the kiddies when a ball lobs over the fence. And I can hear them shut the cyclone gate. And the cicadas. And the cars going off into the distance. Cars going off into the distance. Cars. Funny thing happened when Beryl and I were courting. We went down to Lake Wendouree for a picnic with some of the other billing and cooing couples. And we were sitting there by that lovely lake, looking at the view, not saying anything, close-ish, but not close, until it got dark. And I let my hand slide along the buffalo grass till my little finger was just touching Beryl's. And she didn't move it. We stayed like that for what seemed like donkey's years, till it got really dark and I could feel my old ticker going 90 to the dozen, and I knew it was the real thing. And then Beryl jumped up, laughing with some of the different other couples. But I could still feel the burning feeling of her little finger. So I looked down. And I saw my hand was touching the blessed thermos. Had been for about an hour and a half. I didn't mess round much after that. Funny thing, we went back to Lake Wendouree a few weeks ago. Never go back. Never go back. But the place had changed out of all recognition since the days when the billing and cooing couples used to go there. Lolly papers everywhere. You know, too many amenities. There was an inconvenient number of conveniences as far as I could see. Beryl had packed a thermos and a few bits and pieces, but it was that blowy, the tartan rug wouldn't stay down. And in the end, when I got all the burrs out of my socks, I said, Beryl, let's call this a day. We shouldn't have come back. I said in the car coming down we shouldn't. She said, you said it once, you said it 100 times. It was getting like that when all of a sudden, lo and behold, a gust of wind from nowhere blew a bit of Beryl's greaseproof paper way off to Billy-O. I said, forget it, Beryl. I said, forget it. She said no. She wasn't going to be a grub or a litter bug. She wasn't going home with a lunch wrap on her conscience. Well, to cut a long story short, she jumped up, didn't she? She chased the blessed thing over the miniature hedges, over the flower beds and path through the rose bushes, way off, way off. And before you could say Jack Robinson, she'd tripped over the big hand and stopped the floral clock. Stupid place to put the blessed thing, anyway. I mean, it'd only have to turn 12 suddenly. It could cut a kiddie in half. Of course, people let their kids wander everywhere these days. They let their children run amok. That's why Beryl and I thank our lucky stars. We never had second thoughts about adoption. Oh, that's a lottery. And you hear some terrible stories. You hear shockers. There's a couple that we know. There's a couple we know. Let's call them Bill and Joan. No, better call them A and B. Bill and Joan's their name. A and B were longing for a family and they tried everything. In the end, they filled in the requisite forms and they got a bonzer little kiddie. Well, believe it or believe it not, they had a family of their own after that. See what I mean? What are you to do? You can't send them back. Then we knew this hippie kid, you know. Well, we didn't. We knew his people and we were very, very sorry for them indeed. His father was a lovely man, a returned man. Well, this hippie nearly killed his father by putting his head in a gas oven. His own head, that is, not his dad's. Oh, they got him out. Oh, they got him out. And Dr. Goldsmith, the psychologist at the Louisa Hutchinson Memorial Clinic, he diagnosed it as a cry for help. That hippie must have been a brick short of a load. I mean, if you're going to cry for help, you don't put your head in the stove, do you? Wouldn't you stick it out the window? Little ratbag. Sister Frizzell said I ought to be back on my feet in a day or two, and I can't say I'll be sorry. See, it's no picnic lying flat on your back between strange sheets, particularly if you're partial to the odd milk arrowroot biscuit. Nurse, young husband, she sweeps out my crumbs for me, but you can't expect any little madam to do a personal thing like that, and biscuit burn can be very serious. Then again, I don't want to leave Beryl on her lonesome. She's a handsome woman, and Kiora gets pretty lonely. Pretty quiet when you're by yourself, naturally. Of course, Beryl's got the TV, but she doesn't like to watch that without someone to talk to. She says she's busy, running around all day like a scolded cat, she said. But I've never seen a scolded cat running around all day. But when she popped in this afternoon with a few digests, clean change of pajamas and a box of Callard and Bowser's dessert nougat with the edible rice paper, you know, I could see she was putting a brave face on it. I could see she was cracking hardy, and she turned away and blew her nose a few times too. I only hope and pray that when the time eventually does come, as it will, Beryl's the first to go. You see, it was different in the old days of the mixed doubles and the tennis club. and the crazy whist and the couples. But you can't win a lucky spot all your life.
When songs of spring are sung, remember that morning in May. Remember you loved me when we were young. One day.
Remember the night you said I love you. Remember you vowed by all the stars above.
Love of white Christmas, just like the ones I used to know, where the treetops glisten and children listen to hear.
On Christmas Day, Beryl and I usually have a few people round for the midday meal. It's only once a year, and we like to go to a certain amount of trouble. Beryl could go on cooking till the cows come home, and as she always says, she doesn't mind how much she cooks so long as people eat it up. Waste not, want not, as they say in the classics. Anyway, this year she went crazy. My wife is known for her puff pastry. In fact, she's notorious for it. I think if Beryl ever had anything on a tombstone, it'd just say Beryl Stone, known for her puff pastry. Well, she turned out a batch of 6 little mince pies and one big one to keep her hand in. She always likes to get her pudding over and done with early in the piece, too, ever since the year she fell in. Of course, I do my bit, boiling the sixpences, but my main department is the tree and the decorations, etc. I always get the tree from Bob May. A very nice type of chappie, a returned man. Once a year, he runs his conveyance up to the Dandenongs, to one of those new reforestation plantations in the vicinity of the Sylvan Dam. At night. Well, I don't ask any questions. I just say, thanks very much. I'll leave it at that. Mind you, if I'd known where he got them, it'd be an entirely different matter altogether. Well, by the time I'd finished with it, the tree looked like fairyland, and I put a few extra bricks in the jardiniere to keep it firm so it wouldn't tilt and the cotton wool wouldn't fall off. We kept the Venetians well closed, too, so the blessed thing wouldn't droop all over the shop before the big day. Pine needles. They play merry hell with my wife's appliance. Our dining room table is very deceptive. In fact, all our furniture is deceptive. Very deceptive. But it seats quite a fair compliment with the leaf in. So we invited Mr. and Mrs. Simpson, Clive and Valda Clissold, the Clissold couple, and the Nettletons with their 2 delightful kiddies, Wayne and Marilyn, making 8, counting Beryl and my good self. Beryl said the nippers could sit at the bridge table and have their own little Christmas dinner. Well, on Christmas morning, it looked as though it was going to be a scorcher. So Beryl got up early to pit the dates and do the stuffing before it got too hot to do a hand's turn. And I potted round the garden, giving a few shrubs a drink before the neighbours could wake up and dob me in. I then toddled off to communion at Holy Trinity. And the Reverend Neil Polkinghorn, a very go-ahead young chappie, he told the menfolk they could take their coats off if they were so desirous of doing so. That's about all I can remember him saying. There must have been something about Jesus, but I dropped off, I suppose. Oh, he said he was sorry that there weren't more young people. That's right, more young people at the carols by candlelight service, but you can't expect youngsters to stay up half the night waiting for it to get dark enough for them to light the blessed candles. It isn't feasible. It just is not feasible. He also mentioned that he was sorry there weren't any bells this Christmas, but apparently the Louisa Hutchinson Memorial loudspeaker system is on the blink. A lovely service. Well, by the time I'd got home, Beryl had given the house a good going over with the fly tox, so we wouldn't have to race the blowies to our dinner. Unfortunately, the fly spray is also on the blink. The washer's gone on it. And Beryl has to hold it at a special angle so the blessed fly spray doesn't trickle down her wrist and get under her ring. The result is she's killed all the flies on the skirting board. Well, she'd set the table beautifully, though, with a cracker by each plate, and I noticed that she'd even looked out her precious Cries of London dinner mats. Sure sign of a special occasion in Beryl's book. Meanwhile, I nipped into the bedroom and I got into my Father Christmas costume again, tried it on. I was still having a dickens of a lot of strife with the beard. Beryl had made the beard herself, with pipe cleaners and cotton wool, stitched onto one of her old surgical stockings. And the blessed thing kept coming off one of my ears and gapping at the side. Somehow it didn't look real. Beryl said that kiddies these days notice things like that. In fact, she said they're on the lookout for them. She said when the time came, she'd do something with a Band-Aid. Well, people started arriving before we knew where we were. So I handed round the mince pies and a drop of sherry for those who partook. We didn't go to the trouble this year of serving the sherry with an olive on a toothpick because, well, it isn't everyone's cup of tea. Beryl said she's found the vast majority are just as happy with a pickled onion. Val de Clissold said that she liked sherry. She liked sherry, but sherry didn't like her. And I must say she was looking very peaky, and Beryl said later she thought her whites were very discoloured. Apparently she'd been a bit car sick again on the way over. Well, she's always had that trouble, and they've tried everything. Buicks, Chevrolets, Oldsmobiles, Pontiacs and Hudsons. But Clive was still very pushed getting her to the nature strip in time. Suddenly the door chimes went. I dashed to the door, I had a peep, and it was Alan and Elaine Hotchkiss popping in unexpectedly and with presents, but forewarned as forearmed, and Beryl nipped into the bedroom and she wrapped up some Yardley's talcum powder, some Potron Moore's bath salts, and a lovely big cake of Mornay French fern soap on a rope too. So the Hotchkisses would never have noticed. Oh, but they're a lovely couple, and Alan is a delightful man. A returned man. He's a sporting identity in Glen Iris. Actually, Alan is the pro at the Yarradale Golf Club. And he told me, by the by, that he'd latterly been placed in an exceptionally embarrassing position. Apparently, so Alan told me, he'd been down at the junction about, well, 2.5 weeks ago, and he'd bumped it. More like 3 weeks ago. Yeah, 3. Could be more, could be 2.5, 3, give or take a day. It'd be a good, now it could be a good 3.5 weeks. 4, would be the 4th, was the Tuesday, Tuesday afternoon. Between, it would be all of 3.5 weeks ago. It'd be a good 3.5 weeks ago. Anyway, it doesn't matter, it has no bearing. It has no bearing on the story at all, but just to be on the safe side, to dot all the I's and cross all the T's, let's just say that at one stage of the game, Alan was down at the junction and I'm not even sure it was the junction. It was at the shops. I think it was at those little shops in Cotham Road. No. It was Hartwell. What's Hartwell? No, it wasn't. Look, just to be on the safe side, let's just say that once upon a time, Alan Hotchkiss was somewhere. Actually, in point of established fact, I think all this happened about 20 years ago. Anyway, the point of it all is that he bumped into Dave Cohen. I know that for certain. Old Dave Cohen, who owns Miss Greta Gowns of Camberwell, Caulfield and Clayton. And Coey asked Alan if he could pull a few strings and get him into the golf club. Oh dear. Dearie, dearie me. Well, of course, we've known the Cohens for donkey's years. I can remember when they came to Australia just before the war, without a razoo to their names. They could hardly speak the King's English, not that they tried that hard. He's a very fair chappie, but Beryl said looking at her you could pick it. Not that I hold that against them. Heavens alive, Australia's a free country. And what's the old saying? You shake your family tree, one's bound to fall out. Saying, oh, they have produced, some wonderful people, well, a few wonderful people. Scientists, musicians, giving money to hospitals, that type of thing. Still, he put Alan in a beggar of a position. I mean, as Alan said to me later, he said, you let one in, you've got to let them all in. Before you know where you are, they're running the whole blessed show. I personally, look, I'd have no objection whatsoever if they started up their own golf club. It's not that they're that short, and as Beryl said to me the other day, and it's so true, have you ever seen a poor one? Well, Alan wriggled out of it somehow, but he said to me that type of thing. Oh, it always happens when you get too pally. Give them an inch and they take a mile. Well, when the Hotchkiss couple had vamoosed, Beryl said, dinner's ready when you are. So I turned on the fairy lights. To cut a long story short, they fused everything in the place, including the new eye-level roast master. So by the time I'd fiddled round with the fuse box, we didn't sit down till about 4:30. Turkey was as tough as old Nick. On top of that, I couldn't get the pudding to light. When it finally did, the plastic holly melted, giving it a funny taste. Vi Simpson said it was luscious all the same, and it was the thought that counted. I noticed, by the by, that Beryl had given Vi an extra large second helping of potatoes and dicky bird, even though she'd said she'd had an elegant sufficiency. And Beryl later told me she'd only done it because on the odd occasion we've eaten there, Vi's been a bit of an Ikey Mo. Well, on top of the pudding, Beryl had made a lovely fruit salad, which she'd put in a cut crystal bowl she keeps for best. Oh, she's had that bowl for donkey's years, but it's still got the proud sticker on it. However, the kiddies had an elegant sufficiency. Everyone was full up to Dolly's wax, and I was completely stonkered. So the fruit salad was hardly touched, and Beryl said it was a crying shame after all the fags she'd gone to. Because with the exception of the banana, which goes brown overnight, Beryl had preserved every bit of that fruit herself in her Fowler's Vicola. And I can vouch for it personally because my wife has been bottling all her married life. Oh, though, the crackers were a terrific disappointment. We got them all screwed up trying to make them go bang. There's not the workmanship in a cracker like there is. Clive Clissold said the trick is you unravel them and then you take the strip of cardboard out and you just pull that. Somehow it didn't seem the same. My joke was, Q, when is a door not a door? A, when's a jar? When it's a jar, which is terrifically funny because I got exactly the same joke last year. Beryl said she hadn't seen what joke the Nettleton couple got, but she thought it might have been a bit uncalled for. Well, Beryl passed round the homemade date and cashew fudge, a little bit of coconut ice, and I took the opportunity of nipping into the bedroom and getting into my Father Christmas costume again. And when I came out, I was the cynosure of all eyes. Should have seen Wayne and Marilyn. They thought I was just Christmas. Well, I gave out all the presents, and Beryl and I did very nicely too. Though Beryl said she thought that the talc that Vi Simpson had given her had been wrapped in exactly the same paper that she had wrapped Vi's present in last year. She said, in fact, she was going to put it to the test this year. She's going to mark the paper. She's going to put a little squiggle on it with one of those newfangled ballpoint biros that they're advertising in the paper at the moment. What a 9-day wonder they are. What a flash in the pan. I mean, they reckon you can write underwater with them. But what silly galoot would want to do a stupid thing like that? I suppose if you drowned yourself, you'd always leave a note of explanation. Beryl's now a member of the ladies section of the Glen Iris RSL and Citizens Bowling Club. So I gave her a lovely bowls box with 2 bowls, which the chappie at the sports depot said I could change because I wasn't sure of her bias. I actually have never been sure of Beryl's bias. It was a beautiful thing in polished Tasmanian hardwood. It was more a piece of furniture, really. In fact, the salesman said as much. He said, this isn't just a bowls box, it's also a piece of furniture. And it is. There's no two ways about that. It's a magnificent piece of furniture, though I'd be a bit perturbed if I came home one night and found Beryl sitting on it. She gave me, oh, she spoilt me, as usual. Beryl gave me a beautiful box of initialed pyramid handkerchiefs, which were most acceptable. Unfortunately, there had been a bit of a run on my particular initial. Beryl was lucky enough to get the nearest one to it. She's quite right when she says I'm very hard to buy for. Well, Wayne and Marilyn had a very good innings at the bridge table. In fact, I told them, I said, you kiddies have had a good innings at the table, and they had. They'd had a magnificent innings. So we sent them out to the backyard with their toys. The little devils wanted to hop into their togs then and there and play under the sprinkler. But their mother put her foot down and said they weren't to go near the water till their dinner had settled. In 2.5 hours' time. Well, I handed round the hedgehog and the Turkish delight, and we all sat round the TV set, the new Astor 21-inch, and we watched the Queen's speech and the bushfire warnings. Then I thought it'd be a very good and a Christmassy idea if we all told a few old-fashioned ghost stories around the electric fan. But nobody knew any. No, Beryl said something very funny had once happened to her when she was a kiddie. But she couldn't remember what. Well, soon everyone had to be going, and as there was a big swag of perfectly good tucker going begging, Beryl typically made up a little parcel of leftovers for the Nettletons to drop off at the Louisa Hutchinson Memorial Home for handicapped kiddies on their way home. They'd only put it down in the drive for a couple of minutes to gather up the small fry, and Clive Clissold backed his Packard over the blessed lot. Still, what the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over, as they say in the classics. Well, Beryl likes to see people off. You know, she's old-fashioned. She likes to give everyone a send-off. She likes to stand on the nature strip with a hanky in the air, waving it in the general direction of receding vehicles. Sometimes she's out there for hours. I think she even forgets why she's there. She's just giving the whole neighbourhood a send-off. Passing motorists must be a bit puzzled to see this lady standing there, you know. They must think, oh, that's nice, but we didn't have lunch at her place. Oh, but Beryl was at the end of her tether, and I thought if she doesn't get a bit of shut-eye, she'll be a cot case on Boxing Day. I said to her, I said, Beryl, I said, if you don't get a bit of shut-eye, you're going to be a cot case on Boxing Day. And she was. Because I was at the end of my tether too, you know. But I potted around for a bit, picking up bits of tinsel off the carpet. But to tell you the truth, I felt like a wet rag. A very hot north wind had blown up, and I could hear people laughing way off over at the Humphries place. It rattled the Venetians and blew the majority of the cards off the mantelpiece, too. It's funny, we didn't get nearly as many cards back this year, and Beryl said it was the first time she could remember Barry and Shirley Bedgegood missing. Apparently they've had their fair share of bereavement latterly, but Beryl said things are never so bad you can't put pen to paper. You'd be amazed the number of people who sent us the same UNICEF card we sent them. Wouldn't you think people would have a bit more imagination? Well, when I finally got to bed, and I switched off the bed lamp. I lay there in the dark for a bit, just listening to the Bakelite cooling down. Some nights it's more interesting than others. But lo and behold, Beryl started to talk in her sleep. I think it was the rich food and all the excitement, but she was chattering away like a wagon load of monkeys, yapping away and laughing and crying. Crying a bit. And, you know, I think she reckoned it was Christmas, and she was a kiddie. I thought we'd have a good laugh about it next day, and I tried to remember a few bits and pieces so I could tease her, but when I woke up, I'd forgotten the blessed lot. Of course, Beryl got in a high horse. She said, oh, she'd slept like a log and not to talk a lot of twaddle. It's funny, though, isn't it, the way you can't remember your dreams.
May your days be merry and bright, and may all your Christmases be white. The night you said I love you, remember you vowed by all the stars above.
South of the border, down Mexico way. That's where I fell in love when the stars above came out to play. And now as I wander, my thoughts ever stray. South of the border, down Mexico way.
I am deceased. With the resultant consequence that there's been a considerable change in my lifestyle. I've never enjoyed much of a day's illness in my life, so this little setback came as much of a surprise to me as it did to Beryl, my good wife. Beryl had always had her heart set on the Woman's Weekly World Discovery Tour. But she kept putting it off. I think deep down she must have known a tragedy like this was on the cards. She was always on and on at me to tag along with her too, but I never had the lust to wander. I never saw much point in dragging myself up and down the Leaning Tower of Eiffel. I always thought I'd seen as much of the world as I wanted to after a little run down to Rosebud. Or a spin up to the Dandies on a Sunday afternoon to pick up a couple of shrubs. And look what happened to old Cliff Jennings. His wife was on and on at him to take the big trip. He took the big trip. Massive coronary occlusion in the middle of the changing of the colour. Poor old beggar keeled over, a brand new Nikon hit the deck too. Zoom lens, in-camera sound system, the works. They were both a total write-off. The upshot of it was they had to fly old Cliff's mortal remains back to Australia, first class on Qantas, and the poor old beggar couldn't even avail himself of the free in-flight beverages. Well, that's not my idea of a holiday. But it got to the point where I was getting very worried about Beryl. She was looking very peaky, and her polyp was playing up. Beryl's always had a big polyp problem. She's seen the top polyp man, seen one polyp man after another. She even toyed with the idea of a polypectomy. I thought the sea breeze on the jumbo would do her the world of good. She finally made up her mind. She jumped me from behind a rhododendron. I was in the garden giving the silver birch a drink when she leapt out waving a woman's wig. She said, I'm going, I'm actually going. And she went. I had plenty to do on the home front to keep me out of mischief, what with the garden and the laundry, and nipping down to the shops to do the occasional messages, and topping up the bird bath, putting a little blanket over the budgie's cage, checking his cuttlefish, keeping the home lived in, viewing the Don Lane show, and departing this life. A pretty tight itinerary, even by Woman's Weekly standards. Beryl was on her Scandinavian leg when she got the tragic telegram from Gwen Longmire about my decease. Oh, I wrecked Helsinki for Beryl. If ever a man ruined Scandinavia for a loved one, it was me. And she could have got her death rushing out of that sauna as quick as she did. But I'll never forget the day my little widow came home, as long as... I'll never forget the day Beryl came home. I heard her key in the Yale. Saw a shadow on the front porch through the reeded, rippled glass. Then she came, she plonked down the suitcases when she straightened up her little face, white as a sheet with a mixture of bereavement and jet lag. Of course, there she was in the house that we had shared for all those years together. She had one thing on her mind and one thing only. Cup of tea. Well, she shot down the passage, turned left into the kitchen. She stood like a statue in the kitchen door because there it was. She couldn't miss it in the kitchen. In the sink, too, under the dripping tap. My last Milo mug. Still with a little bit of Milo skin hanging over the side. And there were a few peas in the sink, too, that I hadn't managed to push down the grating. Still green, too. Me gone, them green. Still, she was at the end of her tether, and she took a couple of Valiums, as prescribed by Dr. Hamilton for a period of bereavement. And then, well, she hopped into our nuptial cot for a bit of well-deserved shut-eye. As luck would have it, the ever-thoughtful Valda Clissold had changed my sheets. Not that I'd disgrace myself on the occasion of my passing, which is a lot more than I can say for old Ray Stassinopoulos. He lives at 52 Gallipoli Crescent. Old Ray, well, he had his third stroke, the big one, the biggie. And it was a beauty, too. Right in the middle of Are You Being Served? And a brand new avocado shag pile carpet. He really blotted his copybook. Of course, the family have had a rug over the spot ever since. Well, you couldn't hide a thing that size with a bit of furniture, and, well, 3 enormous couches that look a bit silly in the But old Ray always had a very dry sense of humour, and I bet every time his little widow Althea trips over that rug, he wheezes himself laughing. In the days prior to and immediately preceding my internment, Beryl was like a human dynamo, up to her eyes in paperwork, putting a rocket under the solicitor and attending to my estate. Beryl and I are without issue to date. So she is my sole executrix. She didn't skimp on my insertion either. If ever a man had a lovely long insertion from his wife, it was me. stone. Alexander Horace. Sandy. On April the 7th, devoted son of Horace, deceased, and Enid, née Cockburn, deceased. Beloved brother of Hector, deceased. Lance, deceased. Lorna, deceased. Phyllis, deceased. And Muriel, Western Australia. Much loved husband of Beryl Eileen, née Pizzy, formerly of Cooey Rup. At his residence, alone, suddenly. Brief service, 9:30 a.m, April the 14th, Springvale Necropolis. Family only, please. Family only, please, in lieu of... Family only, please. In lieu of flowers, kindly remember the Holy Trinity Ladies Auxiliary Jazz Ballet Stereo System Appeal. Memories of you I will always keep. God saw you were tired and put you to sleep. Needless to say, there wasn't much of a turn-up at the funeral. Beryl must have a bit of Scotch blood in her because she got a few quotes on me first. She put out tenders. In the end, she settled for a very reasonable little local firm of funeral directors. Nice vehicle, burgundy, power steering. Though I think they could have hoovered out the back seat. My poor little widow had to go all the way out there to the crematorium, up to her ankles in confetti. Blessed ethnic driver, too. Well, you don't want a Greek at the wheel on your last trip. They don't go at the reverential pace we're used to. You know, 40 miles an hour through 2 amber lights and a cripple's crossing. I mean, I wasn't so worried for myself, naturally. But if Beryl hadn't had a seatbelt on, it could have been a double event. She's a marvellous person, though, Beryl. I mean, there she was, sitting up in the cortege like Lady Muck, a plate full, a cup of grief overflowing. She still had the presence of mind to get the driver to pull over outside our local jeweller's shop so she could drop off my watch to get the wrist strap shortened. Not many women would have thought of that. Well, in accordance with Beryl's tasteful request, there weren't too many out there to see me off. There was, in fact, only Beryl. And me, up to a point, and Thelma Bullock, and the Longmires, and old Miss Warner, and the Nettleton couple without their kiddies, naturally, and Valda, bless her heart, dear Valda Clissold, who was, oh, terribly upset. Underneath, in all probability. And nurse young husband, and Greg young husband, nurse young husband's young husband. And there were 3, oh, terribly upset people at the back of the chapel. I've never seen 3 more distressed people in my life. It turned out they were waiting for the 9:45 service. Still, oh, it was nice of them to put their heads round the corner. They weren't called upon so to do. By and large, though, I'm very glad I crossed the great divide in my sleep. I'd never wanted to end up in a hospital or a nursing home or a twilight home or a sunset facility. Or cottages for the elderly, or motel-style accommodation for the bewildered. Smelling of chloroform and Brussels sprouts, with a button on the wall you're supposed to fall against. It rings in the matron's office when she's out. They all smell they smell of gravy in the grave, death and roast dinners. You know, you go to one of these places to see a loved one, you know they're not coming out because the sisters tipped you the wink. So you're sitting on the edge of the bed, trying not to eat their grapes. You say, oh, those grapes, they're for you. All right, well, just one. You leave them with a few twigs. And you're looking down at them, wondering if they know you know. And they're looking up at you, wondering if you know they know you know. They know you know. And you say to them, oh, you're looking marvellous. You say, oh, you'll be out soon. Oh, there'll be no holding you back. You'll be like a wagon load of monkeys. We've kept your lovely room just as you left it. Well, you've let it to an Asian student. You don't tell them that. Andy's bringing his family out next week. But if it's a public hospital, you're in a ward, count down about 5 or 6 or 7 beds. There's always an old bloke lying there, flat on his back with his mouth open. The funny thing is, it's always the same old bloke. No, I think he's a plant. I think he's put there by some organisation. Renter stiff, something. I mean, he's the one they say never gets a visitor. He'll get a visitor, all right. You can get the one we all get when the screens go round our beds for the last time. The one who doesn't bring a box of sanitarium crystallised fruit, but he does bring a box. That punctual old visitor who pops in on us all. Anyway, when you're sitting on the edge of the bed of someone you've known all your life and they're running out of breath and you're running out of things to say to them. Nature times it nicely. And you wait till they drop off. You sneak a look at your watch. And they see you. They think you're timing them, but all you can smell is roast pork and crackling and applesauce and pumpkin and crunchy roast potatoes and parsnip, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower cheese, apple crumble, ice cream and custard being wheeled up and down the hospital corridors. You can't be grief-stricken with your mouth watering. Oh. But when the curtains closed on my casket, when the music stopped and they'd unscrewed my brass handles, we all came back here to Kiora Gallipoli Crescent. All of us. For a cup of tea, a glass of sherry for those who partook, and a slice of scrumptious quiche that Beryl had the foresight to order from a spotlessly clean Danish couple who started up a gold mine near us. And never being one, to dawdle, always wanting to strike while the iron is hot, Beryl then and there ushered them all into the bedroom, laughing and chatting with their drinks and savouries in their hands. She flung open my end of our walnut veneer wardrobe and gave them all first go at my personal effects. And you should have seen them. They were like flies round a honey pot. I've never been so popular at all. I've never been so popular. But after a lot of humming and hawing, they all took their leave, empty-handed. Oh, the kiddies had a few dress-ups. And my tyres are going to see years of wear. You know, tying back some of Beryl's tomato plants. My shirts will, have a long life as dusters. And my Jim Jams will see years of wear and service in the glove box of Beryl's new yellow Mazda. Well, after she'd farewelled my mourners, Beryl put her feet up and suddenly who should stick his head round the corner but Clary Lockwood from 43 Gallipoli Crescent. He plonked himself in the Jason recliner, he polished off the penfolds and proceeded to overdo the condolences. He's a cheeky beggar, he's got more front on him than Myers. But Beryl soon had his number. He wanted to collar my bowling equipment, but he added the gracious proviso he only wanted it if Beryl was 100% sure I had no further use for it. But she had him working in no time. She had him huffing and puffing round the house, ripping stuff out of cupboards, tearing garments off clothes, coat hangers, and out the back. He was pretty soon starting up the incinerator. I've got a little workshop at the back of the... I had a little workshop at the back of the garage with a beautiful set of tools, all in good nick. For years, I'd been making a little Dolly's chest of drawers in polished Queensland maple. Beautiful little thing. I must have started that, donkeys years ago. About the time Beryl and I... Well, before we saw that specialist. What a lovely chap he was, too. Return man. Anyway, I kept on making this little bit of Dolly's furniture. I thought I'd give it to my little goddaughter, little Marilyn Nettleton. My little sunbeam. My little daffodil, I used to call you, didn't I? But it's the time I've helped you up onto the tram with your lunchbox. I haven't seen her for a year or two, not for about 18 years. She's at uni now, I hear, doing third world studies and living with a beatnik from Kuala Lumpur. She wouldn't have much use for Dolly's chest of drawers. But I'd love to have finished it before the Garbos chucked it on the back of their truck. But when you catch the ferry, you're bound to leave something behind on the jetty. Some bit of unfinished business. We all leave undone those things which we ought to have done. But there is one thing I wish I had achieved before I handed in my marbles and jumped the twig. I could have done it. I wanted to do it. It was there to be done. Every day I'd wake up and I'd think, I'm going to do it today. Today's the day I'm going to do it. It was a little ambition of mine. I'd wake up and I'd have the best intentions in the world and something would crop up, some blessed thing had happened, and you'd put it off, and procrastination is a thief of time, and in the end I didn't blessed well do it. Defrost the fridge. I was going to do it. I was planning to do it the day I passed away, as a matter of fact. That was some funny old day. Something's made that day stick in my memory. I went down to the shops, down the junction, in point of fact, and I bought a crayfish from that little bloke with the water running down his window. I've always been partial to a nice bit of cray, and I got it home and I didn't put it in the fridge. I left it on the kitchen table to thaw on the Laminex work surface. Fate moves in a mysterious way, because if it hadn't been for that blessed crustacean sitting there in the middle of the kitchen table all over the long weekend in the blazing sun, the next door neighbours might never have broken in and found me. Well, now I'm more or less permanently housebound. And you know, I see more of Beryl now than I did in the old days before it happened. The only time I don't see Beryl is when she goes out to the garden of rest to see me. I don't know how long she'll keep that up. It's a long haul out there to the necropolis to view my niche. And I put my urn so high up the wall you'd need a blessed extension ladder to pay your respects. Beryl's talking about selling up, moving to a townhouse at Noosa. I'll miss her. We do miss people. But Beryl needs a holiday after the terrible shock that I gave her.
Remember, you vowed by all the stars above. Remember,
When you wish upon a star, makes no difference who you are. Anything your heart desires will come to you. If your heart is in your dream, no request is too extreme. When you wish upon a star, as green as you.
I'm not living at home anymore. Since my decease, Beryl, that's the wife, has put our lovely home, Kiora, 36 Gallipoli Crescent, on the market. It was the first really big decision she came to on her own, so I can't say she reached it without a certain amount of help and advice from our old friend and neighbour, Clary Lockwood, who lives at 43 Gallipoli Crescent and who has latterly been giving Beryl a bit of gentle prodding. The day after my funeral, he turned up on the front porch in his supportive capacity for a cup of tea, and in no time he was hopping into Beryl's homemade passion sponge. He looked across the lounge at my favourite armchair and he said it gave him the creeps to see it, because if he half closed his eyes, he could just about see me still sitting in it. It wasn't too far from the truth, in view of the fact that I was. He said my chair reminded him of a Genoa velvet tombstone in the middle of the lounge. He said, "I wonder Beryl didn't get the waterworks having to run the hoover around it." Well, in no time he'd heaved it, chucked it on the back of his immaculate Vanguard ute, along with my beautiful chrome and Bakelite, all British handcrafted smoker's companion. Beautiful piece of furniture, really. Been a farewell gift to me from some of my friends and colleagues in the buying department at work on the occasion of my retirement. It's always been a bit of a luxury in our house in view of the fact that I'm a non-smoker. But I didn't like to say anything to my workmates. I'd known them all for many, many years. And they put a lot of thought into the gift. Still, you can get pretty attached to furniture. And furniture can get quite attached to you. Which is why we've all ended up here in the Holy Trinity, voluntary helpers, opportunity shop. My lamp, my chair, my hottie, and me. Of course, it's a big period of adjustment, death, and you miss your bits and pieces. Luckily, Clary Lockwood, on Beryl's behalf, has been dropping off the odd bygone from her married life, making the place a little bit more homely. The other day, he called past with 2 tea chests of my left-off effects. including a few wedding presents I'd completely forgotten about. Oh, there was a lettuce leaf cake dish with a couple of chipped tomatoes up one end, Aboriginal money box with one arm, a section of rabbit jelly moulds, galleon fire screen, and the pianola roll Beryl bought once when she thought we might be going to get a pianola. She always keeps it in a drawer in the dining room in case someone comes to dinner who can read music. Then over there somewhere is the Namco pressure cooker that Beryl was always too frightened to use. Ever since the lady next door had to scrape her beef stroganoff off the kitchen ceiling. And underneath that tray over there is Beryl's asphaxadrine inhaler. She used to get a bit snuffly when we were first married, and she sent off for a thing called an asphaxadrine inhaler. You couldn't get them at the chemist, I don't think. You had to write off for them. There was an ad in the back of the Pix, or it might have been the Post, Australasian, or even the Table Talk. It doesn't matter, but it showed an old-fashioned kiddie in period clothes with an asphaxadrine inhaler in his hand, getting intense relief from it. It was next to another ad that used to absolutely intrigue me, which said, "Mark X for your rupture." There was a picture of a bloke's torso with circles all over it, a tasteful torso. And you had to put a cross where your rupture was. Then you'd fill in a coupon, send off a postal note, and a beautiful truss would come back in the post. And no one would know you were ruptured. Except the postman. I once knew an old bloke, a delightful old man, a returned man. You know, he once put a cross in every circle. The postman got a hernia delivering the equipment. He couldn't even lift it onto the veranda. The old boy had to lie down to wear it, too. Starved to death, I believe. Anyway, we had to fit this asphaxadrine inhaler together. Oh, it said even a child could use it. We could never find a kiddie to show us how. Over there somewhere is our old Astor 21-inch TV set. We bought it in the 50s to watch the Melbourne Olympic Games. We saw Lorraine crap on that. Several times in black and white. And Dawn Fraser, Betty Cuthbert and Shirley Strickland. Oh, and of course the Morphy Richards pop-up toaster. The one that once gave Beryl a terrible shock. She was trying to dig out a crumpet with a fork. Oh, that's a mug's game. I've always maintained that the Morphy Richards pop-up toaster fraternity and the Hoover, Heckler, General Electric, Hot Point, Sunbeam, National pop-up conglomerate never took crumpets into account. I don't even think they'd ever seen a crumpet. You slip one in, and half an hour later, if you're lucky, it glides to the surface as white as a lily. I think there's something in the crumpet itself. I once read what was in a crumpet. There's quite a bit of interesting crumpet literature on the cellophane around a packet of crumpets, and I read it once, one wet afternoon. Actually, I read it twice. It was that wet. There's soluble solids of crumpet, edible crumpet fats, edible crumpet flavourings. That's where they're all edible. Then there's emulsifiers and stabilisers. Goodness knows why a crumpet needs stabilising. stop it falling off the plate, I suppose. Then there's niacin, lecithin, riboflavin, trace elements, and enzymes. And it's one of these enzymes that neutralises the electricity in the toast. I mean, theoretically, if you had enough crumpets, you could black out a city. Mind you, sometimes it has the opposite effect. Flames leaping out of the toaster. You've got to turn it upside down and you bash it with a broomstick. Then you're over the sink and you're looking on the floor for it. You're scraping the black fur off until there's nothing left on it but a couple of crumpet holes. A black crumpet hole is no use to man or beast. But there's a little knob on the side of a morphie. Just a little knob, and you could miss it. You could miss it, and Beryl did. She missed it for years. And then when she found it, couldn't leave it alone. That's the women folk for you. To the left of this knob, this little knob, is the word light. And to the right of the knob, depending on whether you're facing the knob or not, is the word dark. And over the middle of the knob, the top of the knob, the top of the middle of the knob, the middle of the top of the knob, is the word medium. The interesting thing about this knob is it isn't connected to anything. It's got a mind of its own. That's when Beryl reached for the fork, thereby making a near-fatal mistake. But it beats me that a household appliance that can't even push up a crumpet can throw a woman from one side of the kitchen to the other. She went up and down. When I came in, the light was swinging. The light was swinging. Beryl must have hit the ceiling. She was just sitting on the kitchen floor, bless her heart, with a fork in her hand, a little bit of crumpet on it. She was just laughing and chatting to herself. If it hadn't been for the fly-wire door, Beryl could have impaled herself on the rotary clothes hoist. She could have gone head first into the compost tumbler. Of course, you'd have the police around in no time asking awkward questions. Excuse me, sir, what's your late wife doing upside down in the compost tumbler? What could you say? Crumpet did that. They wouldn't buy that. They wouldn't buy that in a million years. But since my cremation, I've kept a pretty low profile. You'd be amazed at the number of people who try to get in touch with you. I've never thought of Beryl as a superstitious woman, but the other day, Valda Clissold called around to pay her condolences, and she suggested a séance to get in touch with me. A séance? Well, they got out the old bridge table, the one with a funny leg, the one that once pinched the ball of Beryl's thumb. The whole ball of the thumb came up purple like an emu's egg. Doesn't matter now, but it mattered then. Mattered then, not now. That's life for you. Well, they put us the bridge table, and then they put the Scrabble letters all around it in a circle, and they put an old honey glass upside down in the middle. Or it might have been a peanut butter glass, or perhaps even a Velveeta glass. doesn't matter, they're all equally psychic. And then they turned off everything, except Cop Shop. And Valda put a finger on the top of the bottom of the glass. And she said, "Is anybody there? Is anybody there? Speak to us, sweet spirit." And Clary Lockwood put his finger on the glass too, and his knee under the table, pressed up against Beryl, in a manner which was hardly in keeping with the spirit of the occasion. I've never been more tempted to give that glass a bit of a nudge in all my life. And I've never believed in the occult. I've always thought it was a lot of twaddle. Mind you, a lot here. And in the op shop, they never get a message from the other side at all. Nobody's got their finger on the glass for them. But lately, Beryl's been like God's gift to the tourist industry. She hasn't stopped travelling. She seemed to leap from the cortege into the pioneer parlour coach. Up there with all those other bereaved women, laughing and singing, "I'm looking over a four-leaf clover, tie a yellow ribbon round the old gum tree, strangers in the night, bye-bye blackbird," whizzing through the countryside in the big parlour coach with the sun streaming in and all those little freckled widders' elbows sticking out the windows with their hubby's watches glinting on their wrists. But Beryl needs the time, and, well, I've got all the time in the world. But on most of her trips, she took a pal with her, little Gwen Longmire. Gwen's husband, Jack, went to his reward about 2 years ago. It'd be a good 2 years. It'd be all of 2 years. It'd be all of a good 2 years. Jack went to his reward, and when he took it badly, she wasn't brave like Beryl. Not brave. Not like Beryl. But then she didn't have Clary Lockwood to fall back on. I could never see what Beryl saw in Clary. She used to say he reminded her a bit of Bill Peach. Without the hair. We love Bill, of course. Bill Peach, he could do no wrong in our house. I'd give him a logie, you know, for everything he does. Those Bill Peach documentaries, oh, beautiful. Magnificent. I particularly loved it when Bill Peach went up the Murray River on the Murray River Queen. Oh, I'd give that a golden logie. I was viewing, funnily enough, when that session came on, I called Beryl. I said, Beryl, quickly, it's Bill. It's Bill Peach is going up the Murray on the Murray River Queen. And she rushed in from the kitchen, drying her hands on a Wildflowers of Tasmania Irish dinner tea towel. And she said, it's Bill Peach, he's going up the Murray on the Murray River Queen. I said, yes, I just told you. I said, that's a trip we've got to do. And she did. Because I had a reservation, another ferry, I had another river to cross. Oh, they had a lovely time though, Beryl and Gwen on the Murray River Queen. There was bingo every night and disco classes for the senior citizens, medically supervised. Beautiful films. They had Caddy and Storm Boy and The Hanging Picnic Too Far Away. And they stopped for a barbecue at Swan Reach, and the purser dressed up as a bunyip and chased Gwen into the bushes, nearly ruining her apricot and lime green crimpline pantsuit. But the highlight of highlights was a fancy dress dance. Oh, Beryl loves them. We both did. We used to love fancy dress dances in the old days before the war when we were young. I remember we used to go to a place called Lorne by the ocean there. Oh, beautiful place before the war. Popular with the young married couples. A hop, step and a jump, but lovely. And there'd be a fancy dress dance at Erskine House Lawn every Saturday night. and a band had come down from Geelong or Colac, one of the top Colac orchestras, the top Colac orchestra. And there'd be Japanese lanterns up in the trees too, before there was anything wrong with Japanese lanterns. They were like tomatoes in the trees, those lanterns. I remember looking up and saying to Beryl, look at those beautiful lanterns. I said, Beryl, they're like tomatoes in the trees. And she came over close to me and I could smell her evening in Paris. She looked up, I'll never forget it. She said, yes. She said, they are. She said, they're like tomatoes. Oh, she was always coming out with things like that. We walk along the beach holding hands, before you had to remember to hold hands, and you'd hear the band in the distance. Well, you wouldn't, really. You just hear the drum throbbing away. You'd have to guess the tune. Give me 1 dozen roses, put my heart in beside. A tisket, a tasket, my little yellow. South of the border, down Mexico way. Turaluraluraluralai. Any umbrellas, any umbrellas, little old lady passing by. Katie, beautiful Katie, you're the only good girl that I adore. When the moon shines over the mountain, I'll be waiting at the kitchen. Any evening, any day, any little Lambeth way. When they begin up again, it brings me. There's a rainbow on the river. Somewhere over the rainbow. Quick step, slow foxtrot, quick fox, slow fox, quick fox, slow fox, Belita, Pride of Erin, waltz. Beryl went as a Honolulu lady that night in a grass skirt. Took us about a fortnight to get the nugget off her face. Solvol did the trick in the end. Mixed up with a bit of Bon Ami and old Dutch cleanser. And I put a sheet over my head and I went as a ghost. I put a sign round my neck that said ghost, in case someone thought I was a sheik. Because there were about 5 sheiks, only one ghost, which was me, and I got the second prize for originality, too. Gives you a rough idea of the standard. It was a lovely box of Columbine caramels with the little dancing ladies up the side and a window all the way down to show you how many caramels were left. Mind you, that was a long time ago. That was before the war. Before the war. They don't put windows in confectionery these days. I reckon I'd be a dead cert for the first prize now. Anyway, if I'd had any kiddies, they'd be orphans. So I'm glad that Beryl and I never embarked. I mean, you hear some terrible stories about kids and what they do to the old people. Bundling them off to twilight homes. Some of them dragged off the bowling green, I've heard that. Dragged, kicking and screaming off the bowling green. Oh, there was an old bloke that we knew. A lovely fellow, wasn't a returned man, but one of the nicest people you could ever wish to meet. Well, he was delivered to a Sunset facility by his nephew, who he'd never even met. One day he's playing bowls. All his mates around him. He's happy as a box of birds. Happy as a sandboy. Suddenly this bodgy, you know, with a Cornell wild haircut, comes sauntering across the bowling green, taps him on the shoulder. He says, "Excuse me," he said, "I'm your nephew. The fan's over there." This old bloke, he arrives in the home. He's still in his creams with a bowl in his hand. Thought the nursing staff were lady bowlers. "Hi, Glenys. How are you, Elsie?" "Nice to see you, Esme." Of course, unfortunately, the carpet in this hospital was green. On his first day, he crippled a specialist. They took the bowl off him, nearly took his hand with it. He was dead a day later. Not for me. Not for me. If I could have my death all over again, I hope I cross the great divide, catch the ferry, jump the twig. I hope I go to my reward. I hope I fall asleep in the arms of the Almighty, cross the great divide. I hope I am gathered. I hope I let the matter drop in the comfort and security of my own home. Of course, property in Gallipoli Crescent's gone through the roof. I mean, I once said to Beryl, I said, "If anything happens to me, there's solid gold under this house." She must have taken me pretty literally. I'd hardly been sprinkled in the Memorial Rose Garden before Clary Lockwood was under there with a metal detector. He didn't find much. Just an old Ardagh cigarette tin, a rusty trowel some Dago brick he must have left there before he was interned for the duration. Oh, no, they found something. They found one of those old photo albums we used to have before the war with the dark brown pages held together with like a little silky dressing gown cord. Fancy corners on the snaps too, old faded snaps they were, the colour of tea that you make with condensed milk. I must have put that under the house donkeys years ago, so Beryl wouldn't find it. Used to upset her a bit. Heaven knows why, there was a few snaps in there glued in that, well, of me and a girl from the Sunday school that I used to court before I knew Beryl, little Phyllis Twemlow. She was a goer. I was pretty struck on Phyllis. Oh, there were pictures of Phil and me at Sunday school picnics when we were kids, down at Black Rock and Half Moon Bay and Maudie Alec and Mentone and Rosebud and Dramana, and up at the Wildlife Sanctuary at Healesville, patting wombats. Wombats would be dead now. But I don't know what happened to Phil Twemlow. I mean, I lost track of her. Someone said to me she'd married a Rawley man once. Got a lifetime supply of ready relief. Then there was a bloke at Lodge, 20 years ago, plus, who I met, never saw again. Who knew her, I think. Who knew her, or did he know of her? Or knew of someone who knew her, or knew someone who knew of her. Or knew of someone and knew of someone who knew her, or knew of her, or thought he did. Thought he was wrong. Anyway, he said that she'd had a big family of kids. And if that's true, I'm glad, because she was pretty fond of youngsters. But I've lost track of her. Funny how you lose track of the people you love, people you care about, people you hardly know. You see them all the time. But it was damp under that house. It can get very damp under a Glen Iris home. And that old snapshot album, was swarming with slaters. Clary Lockwood had to carry it to the incinerator on a shovel. Wood was a beggar to burn. Half a tin of Kero didn't do it. He had to spill the Kero over the pages and stick them through with a garden fork, turning them and stirring them deep into the incinerator. 1936, 1937, 1938. And I'd put in a bit of time many years ago, sticking those snaps in, getting them looking nice. But he can see himself in a lot of things at my place, Clary can. You know, he broke into the shed, broke into my workshop. He didn't ask Beryl for the key, just smashed in the door. And he took all my tools. I had my name on all of them on a Band-Aid. And he took the Qualcast mower and the Pope sprinkler. And I'd like a shilling for the number of times I've rotated that sprinkler. I knew he'd been pinching the shrubs. I'd hear him, you see. When I was sick, I'd hear him down the side of the house, brushing past the ferns, brushing past the daphne and the hydrangea. He took the erica, the shrimp plant, the melaleuca, and the Pelargonium. He's had his eye on Beryl's kumquat for years. Oh, the auction. That's tomorrow. The old house in Gallipoli Crescent's been completely stripped. There's just squares on the walls where the pictures used to be. Well, the grocer's calendar's still behind the kitchen door. It's out of date. I'm not going back. You never go back. Never go back. Beryl's bought a condominium at Burley Heads. Clary Lockwood's chipped in a few dollars. Meanwhile, until the auction's over, she just camped in the spare bedroom. Just to borrow all the necessities of life from the neighbours. Funny enough, she's just about to cross the street now with a cup of sugar in her hand. Talk of the devil.
And after